Welcome back for another book talk. Today we are talking about this one. So this is Grave Peril by Jim Butcherson. This is the third in the Dresden Files series. So this book, if you haven't read the previous two, this is where the plot is no longer contained within that story. So the first two, really you didn't need to read the previous ones and like read them in order. You kind of got the gist of it. This is where that starts to change. There are many loose ends that are not tied up in this book, and it really actually becomes like a true series and not just like installments like a Nancy Drew series. It's more of a traditional like continuous storyline. So with that said, there's not really too many spoilers from the previous books, but just in case I might mention something, just be aware. It is the third book in a series. So for the non-spoiler section for this particular book, like I mentioned, this does not have a full contained ending, and I'll talk about my feelings about that in the spoiler section, but we don't have the full conclusion to everything that's brought up in this book versus the other ones. Our main thing that we do battle against, obviously, that part of the story gets wrapped up, but there's plenty of other things that are no longer fixed in just the single book. So the main things that we're going up against in this book, because I don't know if it's going to continue in the series, but so far each book has had like a main thing that they're fighting against. So book one was the wizard and demons and that stuff mostly for the book one. And then book two was all of the werewolves. And this one, we are mostly dealing with a thing called the nightmare. And then we also get to see a lot of other random stuff. So we have a kind of knight dude, very Christian, instant turnoff for me, but we have that archetype of a character. My husband described it as the paladin, so for those who do like D&D and stuff, that's gonna mean more to you. But like really, he's like the man of God with a sword. And so we have that, and like that kind of feels like its own thing because it's a magical sword and he gets his powers from God and whatever. Then you have vampires, they come back, and then some. Then we find out there's multiple types, and like I don't know if it's types, it kind of sounded like it, but definitely different like kind of countries. They're different courts, but they don't really intermingle, so it's like different kingdoms or something, different government bodies of the vampires. And then we also get mentions of the Fae. We get to learn a little bit more about that world. Never Never. And then we also get to have like a brief mention of a different mythical creature. So like there's a lot to go on in this book. And really there's no like previous stuff that's brought into this book. So overall, my thoughts on this book, this is where I'm giving up on the series. My husband already has it rented from Libby, so he's gonna listen to the next book. But even he's like, I don't know. Because we didn't like this book. Me and him read it together. Well, I read the physical book, he listened to the audiobook, and neither of us loved this book. The first one, amazing. The second book, eh. This one, even less than the second book. And I'm kind of getting tired of, well, it's gonna get better after this one, after this one, after this one. And it's like, I am 3 books in. I should be enjoying the story. I should enjoy the characters. I should enjoy what's going on with it. It's not it for me. A lot of people really like this series. A lot of the reviews that I've seen on YouTube love it. So if you like it, that's cool. We can like different books. This just isn't it for me. And some of the reasons really are spoilery. So if you want to be spoiled, you'll have to continue watching. If not, read it and then we can talk about it. Because it is spoilery of a lot of the things that I don't specifically like in this book. Still trying to keep it vague. A lot of people loved the plot. Me and my husband didn't. There were so many instances, and it felt like it was just a continuation of poor writing from the second book into the third. The convenience in the plot, and not necessarily convenient for Harry all the time, but as an author creating conflict, it was convenient, and it was random, and it didn't really fit. There's one whole storyline that me and my husband talked about, and it's like, if you took that out, you might have to change like 5 sentences really, and the story would continue without it. And it was like, what is the purpose? And the only purpose is that it's going to be a problem later down the road. And the author's just trying to start introducing stuff. And it, like, the things that are brought up in this book, there's no mentions as to why Harry doesn't use some of these techniques in the previous books, where it would have been more convenient. Like, it's just random stuff, and there's, like, the way that a lot of the characters are brought in, and, like, the story arcs with characters. We're 3 books in, there should be some development. There's really not. Again, overall, a lot of people really like this series, but a lot of people don't. And I'm into that band camp. I've given it 3 books. The first one I thought was good. That went away fast. So, on to the spoilers for Grave Peril. So, one of the things that a lot of people complain about is how Harry acts. He tries to be the chivalrous dude, he tries to be the hero, but he just comes across as egotistical and awkward because he's not really what he keeps trying to portray himself to be. And I don't know if that's on purpose or if the author genuinely doesn't understand it, because he's trying to write this character that women have to be saved, which is annoying because the true hero, like, he's the guy, like, the way that I described it with my husband is Harry is the, like, equivalent of, like, the dudes that are trying to, like, show that they're masculine by having, like, the big jacked up trucks and just try to be such a manly man. And then there's the other guys that can walk in a pink t-shirt and instantly have more masculinity to them. Not that pink is necessarily a feminine color, but, you know, like, traditional masculine stuff doesn't matter to him, and yet he just exudes masculinity and is exactly the energy that the first guy is trying to do, but the other guy just has a natural talent for it, and it just naturally comes from him, and he doesn't try for it, it just is. And that's what Harry feels like for being a hero, because he sucks at it, truly. His morals are gray, and, like, kind of comparing it back to D&D, Harry is chaotic neutral, because he only does what he thinks is right in the most stupid, chaotic ways. And it always comes to bite him in the ass because he doesn't think ahead. And then on the opposite spectrum, you have Michael, who is definitely lawful good. And so because of that, he's analyzing the whole situation and isn't getting distracted by the stupid little stuff and doesn't try to make mistakes. He's trying to plan for every possible thing to go wrong, like a hero should, whereas Harry's just going to rush in on a whim because he got an idea for it. And it's just stuff like that that it's like, I'm so tired of seeing Harry try to be this thing that he just isn't. And, like, there's no arc at this point. We're 3 books in. He hasn't done any redeeming, like, anything to make him seem like a hero. He defeats the bad guy, sure, but that's not necessarily what makes a hero. Like, that's one part of a hero. And honestly, the way he goes about it, it's just, it doesn't have the hero vibes that he's trying to pretend that he has. And again, that could be intentional. Harry might be more of like an anti-hero kind of vibe, where you love to hate him, and yet he's still the hero of the story. But, like, it's just, I don't like Harry. He's just awful. And the way the author writes women, and specifically how he describes women, is really obnoxious. Like, I don't know how, like, horrible of a guy Harry has to be, if this is intentional, if he includes it in his other books, because he does have other series outside of this. But, like, the way he talks about women in the most random ways. The last book I mentioned where he's, like, gravely injured, but yes, let's go have sex right now. That makes sense. Like, werewolves are rampaging the streets, but sure, let's hook up really quick as you're, like, basically on your deathbed. Sure, that's a logical thing to do. And then in this book, we have Harry, like, there's just a lot of sex that doesn't need to be there. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it in books. Leave me at the door, I don't need to know. And, like, a lot of times it really doesn't do anything for the story, but that's, like, a personal preference of mine. And, like, the way he goes about writing these women and, like, the sexual innuendos and, like, little hint things, it's like, why? Like, at the masquerade ball, we have Harry literally being like, but look at her boobs. Constantly. And it's like, really, you're surrounded by vampires. They want to kill you. They really could. I don't know why they're not. Like, they're doing it strictly because of, like, really just upholding a law. And if they wanted to break that, they could. And you would be dead. Because I just feel like vampire versus wizard, and a wizard who's an idiot in particular, like, the vampires are gonna win. And, like, I don't know how he's always so special. It kind of gets old. Because he really, like, even when he fails, he doesn't. And there's never, like, the low point for the character, really, because he always finds a way out of it, which is what you're supposed to have happen, but it just always feels too convenient. And he's always at his lowest of lows, and then he magically finds more energy, more power, whatever, to keep going, and it's like, you can't do that in every single book. But back to the point of the sexuality thing, it's, like, kind of gross. Like, there was one part, I think it was when he was in the basement, as he's poisoned, and, like, injured and, like, whatever, and the villain is, like, fondling her breasts, and I'm like, what the fuck kind of villain is doing that? Really? Who's sitting there like, ah, yes, my chest, as I'm talking to you? Like, who does that? No, that's in porn. That's not real life, especially as a villain. Like, I know that his vampires are kind of trying to put, like, Anne Rice to shame, because hers are definitely sexual creatures, but, like, it's putting it to a new level of just lust, and, like, it takes away a lot of the vampire allure, how he's writing his vampires, because, like, they're supposed to be sexy and alluring, but it's not lust. They're very different, and he just puts it off that they're just, like, these sex-crazed monsters. And it felt really lame and was, like, such a disservice to all of the vampire books and the vampire, like, common lore that we have. It was really bad. And that's the thing. It's like, I loved Thomas. I thought he was a fun character. He was interesting and different. And, like, until I learned that he's just a lust vampire, which was like, oh God, I don't want to know. I'm not into those books. If you are, that's cool. That's just not my thing. But, like, he's part of the White Court, and he's a lust vampire. Like, my husband didn't connect that dot, and I was like, really? Really? And, like, the blood-sucking ones are the Red Court? And I'm like, you know what? Just absolutely not. Like, I don't know. I don't like the random sexual things in this book. And it's been in the series, and I'm just over it. Because even, like, when they take the one chick back to his apartment towards the end of the book, like, the vampire suddenly is able to overcome the demon by using his special saliva, which is pretty common in the vampire lore. But, like, he uses that and then is, like, lusting and creeping on some random chick who's possessed to distract the demon. Like, it just felt really ick. And it's like, why? Why is this here? If it was labeled as erotic fiction, that would make more sense. Yep, you know what you're getting into. But this is more aimed as, like, fantasy murder mystery, as, like, the series as a whole. So it just doesn't feel like it fits. And I'm over it, and that's one of the biggest reasons. It's just the random sex things that are shoved into these stories that don't need to be there. So the next thing that we need to talk about is the godmother. She felt so unnecessary in this book. And honestly, it's so many things in this book. It made me question, how much did the author really plan his book? Now, I'm not one to talk on that. My own book is a hot mess, but mine's also spanned out quite a bit, and it doesn't have an editor like he would have with a publishing house. They have professionals who do this, and they probably have multiple and, like, different rounds of stuff. And if you're paying a professional to do it, they should do a very good job. And also, like, if you're picked up by a publishing house, I expect a little more than self-published authors, to be honest. You made it into the system, and so I expect your writing to be a little bit higher of a standard than self-published. And because of that, the whole thing with the godmother felt really weird. Like, there was no mention, I swear, in the other books. And she definitely didn't have a presence in the other books. So suddenly, why now is she here? That was never really explained well. And all of her interactions were convenient. And again, not necessarily convenient for Harry, just convenient for the plot. And she just randomly shows up and then randomly leaves. And like, she didn't feel necessary. And I know other people really loved her. I found her super obnoxious, and it was a just big question of why does this character even exist? And like, there was no point to her. I hated her. She was so annoying. And like, Harry trying to outsmart a fae that's supposedly like hundreds of years old, ain't no way somebody who's 30 years old compared to, I don't know, let's say 200 years old. There's no way a 30-year-old is smarter than some creature that is that much older than him. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And her entire presence just doesn't make sense. And how he's able to outsmart her all the time got really old. When can Harry just be an idiot and not have something, like, let him be saved for once? Like, and not because the godmother wants to be the one to kill him. Like, her entire presence was annoying and completely unnecessary. Me and my husband both were like, if you took her out of the plot, it wouldn't change the story. The events would still go down basically the same. Which leads to another character that didn't need to exist. The dragon. That's a cool concept, don't get me wrong. Like, I want to know more. Like, how is dragon in human form? And then, like, the thing where he has, like, a cigar or cigarette, but it's not lit, and he's just, like, smoking out of his, like, mouth. Or nose or whatever, as is. That was cool. That was fun. Didn't see that coming. I think that's a really cool concept. But he literally couldn't exist in this book and it would change nothing. Absolutely nothing. There was no reason to throw in another magical creature for no reason, and like, that character didn't need to exist. It could have been another vampire and it would have worked just the same. Absolutely no reason. And that's the thing, is there's so many things in this book that didn't need to be there. Now, as for like the overall plot of the story, I was ready to like DNF this quite a few times. It took me a long time to get through this book. The first part of this was really feeling like I was reading The Exorcist, but with magic and like wizards, because it felt like The Exorcist. I was ready to have some child in bed possessed, which we kind of did, but like, we had a lot of possessions. And the whole thing with Michael, me and my husband were like, is this the guy from the first book? We rented these from the library, so we couldn't just go grab our book and be like, was that the other dude's name? But like, why are we so chummy with this dude that, like, watching the other reviews, apparently he is a new character. We were like, is it the dude with the sword from the first book? Because suddenly we're real chummy with this guy we have never had any mentions of, never introduced to. This is the third book in the series. Why are we so chummy with this guy? And the fact that we start off in an action scene didn't work for me or my husband. Both of us were like, why? Why are we playing catch up? You can decide the order of the story. This is stupid. Like, why am I dropped in the middle of a fight scene? This is like, no. And then on top of that, you have, again, Exorcist vibes, and specifically like the churchy aspect of it, and like the way that Michael is constantly pushing his narrative on Harry got really old really fast. Living in Utah, kind of used to that, because the Mormons really do try and push themselves onto you all the time. And so to see him pushing all of his beliefs constantly on Harry was getting old. Because it's like, not only is it like, well, don't swear around me, and like, don't use the Lord's name in vain. And it's like, bro, that is a you problem. That is not a me problem. That is a you problem. And how he, like, at the beginning of the book, he's like pressuring Harry to say that he loves Susan. Why would he love her? That was another thing. Is like, their relationship is so casual. They could be friends with benefits and it would make more sense. But like, we'll get there in a second. So with Michael pushing this constantly, like, that was the thing that I really despised about him, and the whole book constantly had that vibe throughout it. And it's like, why did we suddenly have this like total 180? And suddenly now it's really churchy. And it's really like the Christian church specifically, of just any of the denominations, doesn't really matter. It's all about like, you have to believe what I believe, and God gave me power, and may the Lord be with you, and blah. Like, super ick. And like, again, the way that it's pushed onto Harry, and he's like, not my thing. And like, he's a wizard, so maybe it really ain't his thing. He's seen some stuff and he's like, you know, it doesn't really line up. Not for me. But like, constantly pushing his beliefs onto Harry got really old. And his idea of what Harry should be doing. Like, I don't like Harry by any means, but like, let the dude live his life. He's like, what, 30 something? He can do what he wants. Back to the point with Susan, why does she exist? Because, like, again, Michael's pushing him at the beginning of the book to say, I love you, about Susan. Which, first of all, what guy is, like, having a conversation with his friend and is like, you gotta say the words? Like, I mean, I'm not a man. Never lived as a man. But I'm gonna assume that's not a normal conversation that, like, typically goes down between two dudes. Just like, why? Like, and he's, like, you're not the first person that needs to be told the words. Probably the person that you have those feelings about should be the ones to hear those words first. Unless you bring up the conversation and you're like, I don't know how I feel about these things. I would like to discuss it with you. But Michael's pushing the, like, topic, and Harry doesn't want to have that conversation. And there's a lot of boundaries that just, like, constantly got overstepped in this book that I didn't like. And, like, again, specifically with Susan, this whole thing of their relationship doesn't make any sense. Like, there is no slow burn of a romance for 3 books. They just randomly meet up. He usually blows her off for their dates. They hook up, they have sex, and then they're just using each other, really. He wants to have sex. She wants to have a story for her job. And a story. Like, there's no romance there. There's no relationship. They barely see each other. So why are we suddenly, like, in the I love you stage? And at the end of the book, he wants to marry her. Why? There's no romance. There's no lead up. There's nothing there. Having sex with a person does not equate having, like, any kind of, like, actual, like, love or a relationship with them, really. Especially how infrequent they are. So, like, why? And, like, the other characters have more of a story arc, even in this book alone, than Susan has this whole time. She's just obnoxious. And it's like, I'm so tired of the only time she really comes into the story is to annoy Harry. Where, like, what kind of a girlfriend, really, do you want that's gonna call you up constantly and be like, but you have to talk to me right now, blah, blah, blah. Like, she's just the obnoxious girlfriend. And that's a really terrible role. And again, one of the reasons I don't like this book. I don't think he writes the women very well. And, like, Murphy is interesting, but also she's always constantly mad at Harry, which doesn't make sense. Like, and the reasons she's mad at him are so stupid. Granted, she really didn't have a role in this book, which was a bummer, because, like, she's the only, like, really strong female character. Susan just exists. Like, she could be a tree in the background and it would basically be the same thing. Now, at the very end of the book, she does finally have a purpose, a little bit. Because then, she's like a half vampire. Because they tried to start to turn her, but she has to, like, take a life or whatever, or feed or whatever, to, like, fully become a vampire, but she's refusing. Then, she has some character development. Maybe at this point onwards, she could have a story and, like, have an arc and, like, she's got her own thing she's working on. But up until this point, not really. And also how her memory of just him was taken, I felt like was such a cheesy way to go about taking away the memories. That was really stupid. I didn't like that. Take the whole year. It's fine. And so, like, I didn't like that, but I liked the idea that she became a half vampire. Now, Harry not respecting her boundary at the end, and she's like, look, I don't want to. I'm working on my own shit. I need you to not be here right now. And then he doesn't take no for an answer, and that's like a red flag. When it's like, you know what, Harry, you're a dick. She said no. No is a complete sentence. I don't care that you love her. She's going through some stuff. Like, she obviously doesn't want you in her life. She ghosted you, she ran away, she moved, she changed her phone number, whatever. Like, she does not want you around. You used magic to hunt her down and take away a moment from her where she doesn't feel like a monster that she's kind of becoming, and just to make it about you because you want to be with her. No. Goodbye, Harry. That was my final straw. He couldn't respect her boundary and was just constantly still pushing, and she's like, no. Like, I need to work on my own shit. And then he just keeps pushing, and then she still has to be like, no, like, go away. Like, I might have feelings for you, but I need to work on this on me right now. That should be plenty of a reason for him to walk out and let her be, and when she's ready, she could come back. And it's just the whole book. There's so many other things, but, like, those are just the main ones that I wanted to bring up. So anyways, needless to say, I'm pretty sure I'm done with this series. I think I'm gonna move on to other books, better books. And because the vampires sucked so much, literally not at all in this book, really, they were just lust things. Like, I don't even know why they're called vampires. They have none of the usual vampire lore, other than like the random stuff that, again, that was the other thing I wanted to mention. Like, Harry suddenly knowing how to do a like shield spell against bullets. Where was that in the last book? When we have bullets being a problem. Like, it's just, he randomly knows stuff that it doesn't make sense. And he has his power ripped out from him. He's poisoned, but he can still do stuff. And the poison plot twist was really stupid. Because if you're that poisoned and you only have that many hours and you've been knocked out for who knows how long, ain't no way, especially if you're on the brink of death, that like you're gonna be able to do that. And how he has a ghost suddenly created because his body died for like a split second, kind of. Like, if you're able to be revived through CPR, I don't know that it would really count as making a ghost at that point. Your heart's just kind of on pause for a split second, like your brain still has enough oxygen to like function so that they can pump you back to life. You know, like, it just felt really dumb to have a ghost of Harry spontaneously show up, and how they dealt with that whole thing was just like so convenient and just weird, and I didn't like it. So moral of the story, I am done with this series. I don't think I'm gonna read the next ones. I think I'll just have my husband spoil what happens because I don't care. And like, truly, Harry is just not my kind of guy. I don't like him as a person. He's always focused on how women look in the most inopportune moments. Who the hell cares how the fabric is hanging off of her hips and what her like boob size is? Like, who cares? You're surrounded by like enemies. Maybe, just maybe, think with the other brain, the other head of yours, and then you could get somewhere and not be an idiot. So anyways, I know other people love this series, and that's great. If you love it, that is phenomenal for you. Not everyone loves the same books. That's okay. I'm over it. I'm done. The first book was good. That's where I would stop with the series. So anyways, that is going to be it for talking about this book. I can finally return it back to the library and never pick up these books again. So anyways, thank you for watching this book review. I would love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. Speaking of books, I do have my own that I've written, the two of them, in the description if you wanted to check those out. And of course, the rest of the week I usually am talking about writing my third novel, so make sure to follow along for that journey. Make sure to like and subscribe. I post pretty much every single day. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all soon.